Welcome back everyone to another video. For this one, it's going to be a lot of fun. Today we're going to be talking about the man who fought the cartel and won, who was named Don Alejo Garza Tamez. And yes, I know I'm wearing a hat, but that's because for this occasion, I felt like it was very suited for this. And I had it, so why not wear it? Oh, baby Gronk. Baby Gronk. But before we get into the video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you have any suggestions or anything like that, you can always leave them in the comments. Or if you want to follow what I do, you could just hit the subscribe button and I'll try to post as often as I can. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Don Alejo Garza Tamez, also known as Don Alejo, grew up in Allende, Nuevo León in 1933, where he spent most of his childhood in the most wooded area parts of the state. And that while he was growing up with his younger brother, helped their father, who owned a sawmill during this time, where he learned how to saw the wood and sell the product. He would eventually find the timber supply store El Salto in Monterrey, which was named after the place where he got his product from, El Salto, Durango. And that during this time, he would open up more branches during his success in Allende and Montemorelos. Alejo would be an accomplished fisher and hunter, having learned these skills as a child, and as he got older, he began to collect weapons. Now, for those who don't know, Mexico is very strict with their gun laws, having only two in the whole entire country, one in Mexico City and another in Nuevo León. So it's not impossible to get a gun, it just takes a long time to get it, not to mention there's a lot of paperwork, background checks, stuff like that, and that you could only get specific types of guns depending on certain conditions such as home protection, hunting, among a few other things. So for those who knew Don Alejo, they would say he was an accomplished marksman where he hunted deer, geese, and even pigeons, and where he even established the Dr. Maria Manuel Silva hunting, shooting, and fishing club. He would even help his local community in the promotion of poultry farming as a replacement for the orange plantations, as during this time they developed frostburn, and that he was known as a man of honor and integrity, and that his word was as good as any contract. And that together with his brother, they bought the San Jose Ranch in Ciudad Victoria in honor of his father, Jose Garza. And on the 13th of November 2010, members of Los Zetas Cartel went down to Don Alejo's ranch, where they told him that he had 24 hours to give him the ranch or there would be consequences. And Don Alejo, who was a man who was strong, hardworking, among so many other things, told them flatly that he would not be giving anything to them and that he would be waiting for them. Now, let me just say, this man was about that life, okay? Not only was he a man's man, but he would not let himself be pushed around by anyone or anything, especially when it involved things that he loved dearly, whether it was his family or his ranch, which he loved very, very dearly. And a part of you is probably asking, like, Don Alejo, why would you not just give up the ranch? Especially during this time where the Zetas were a very powerful cartel gang at the time, and they were very brutal in their operations with a lot of beheadings and stuff like that. Hey guys, Future Me here. So before we kind of move on into the video, I kind of want to explain why I'm here specifically. And so normally I always have someone watch my videos and they give me feedback. They know who they are and I appreciate them, but generally when we were kind of talking about the video, they were giving me feedback. They told me that it felt like the video was missing something. So after talking a bit, we kind of came to the conclusion that there's not that much in terms of what exactly the atmosphere was during this time period. Specifically talking about the cartels and how powerful they were exactly, because I kind of talked about it a little bit but didn't really go in depth exactly, nor exactly like the political atmosphere, which I will talk about in a minute. But that's generally what we came to the conclusion. So that's what I'm going to do in this little segment, so that way you guys are aware of exactly what was happening, why things were the way they were, and I'll kind of answer a little bit as to why Don Alejo didn't really go to any kind of military or any federal or any kind of help outside, like in regards to like police and stuff. So I'll explain that as we kind of continue on, but just sit back and enjoy this little segment. So quick note, whenever in the old footage I mention Zetas when it comes to talking about the cartel, what I actually mean is the Zetas. Zetas means Z, like the letter Z. So whenever I reference the Zetas, I actually mean the Zetas, which is the gang name, the Z's. So, okay, just want to get that out of the way because I noticed it, and there's probably going to be someone that knows about the Mexican cartel, and they're going to be like, "Hey, you're wrong." Yes, I know, I'm aware. But anyways, let's keep moving on. Los Zetas, also known as the Z's, is a Mexican criminal syndicate that was well regarded as one of the more dangerous of the Mexican cartels during their time. They were known for engaging in brutal shock and awe tactics such as beheadings, torture, and even indiscriminate murders. And while primarily concerned with drug trafficking, they would also have other profitable business ventures such as street walking, also gun rackets, and they would also operate with protection rackets, assassination, extortions, kidnappings, among other illegal activities. Their organization is based in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, right across from the border of Laredo, Texas, where they then established themselves in the 1990s, where commandos of the Mexican army deserted their ranks and became the enforcement arm of the Gulf Cartel. And in February of 2010, the Zetas broke away, forming their own criminal organization, rivaling that of the Gulf Cartel. They were at one point Mexico's most largest and most expansive drug cartel in terms of geographical presence, and that they even managed to overtake their rivals, the Sinaloa cartel, in terms of physical territory. But in recent times, the Zetas began to fragment, with them even starting to have their influence diminish to the point where they kind of broke off into different factions. Los Zetas were named after their first commander, Arturo Guzman de Sena, whose federal judicial police radio code was Z1, which was a code given to high-ranking officers. So right now I'm going to be covering a little bit about the political atmosphere during this time with the then president Felipe Caldreon, who during this time was kind of known for being a little bit shady, especially when it came to his election as president-elect, not to mention on how he kind of ran things during this time. He would declare a war on drugs in order to gain popularity after the elections, with 60,000 people officially dying on the war on drugs by the end of his term. The beginning of the drug war would coincide with an increase in homicides, with it peaking in 2010 before it would eventually decline during his last 2 years in office. And then in 2019, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman of the Sinaloa cartel was allegedly linked to Genaro Garcia Luna, the Secretary of Public Security under Felipe Caldreon, which led to Garcia Luna being arrested in the United States. And on the 21st of February 2023, he was then guilty of all charges pressed, including drug trafficking. After Luna's conviction, General Tomas Angel da Juarez, Calderon's subsecretary of National Defense, declared that Calderon knew that Luna had ties to the cartel. And then that same month, they did a poll with 84% of the participants wanting to have an investigation done on Calderon also. So hopefully you got a general idea of what was happening during this time, because on one side you have the cartel, which were extremely dangerous, extremely powerful, extremely influential. Not just talking about the Zetas, but also the Sinaloa, the Gulf, among other cartels, because they would have, in terms of influence, they could basically go to politicians, they could go to media outlets and basically tell them not to publish stories. Some other ones would be like they would have the police under their thumb, also the military, so you could just not go to them for any help whatsoever, because you would have the fear of them being under the payroll, and then they would basically just tell the cartel and they would deal with you. So it was just not good on that side. Not to mention that the Zetas during this time were also considered terrorist organization because of the attacks, the massacres. You could just look up stories about it. They were not that good. They were extremely brutal. So the magnitude of fighting them, especially for Don Alejo, it's like you gotta respect that, because it's scary. It's scary to fight the cartel, especially ones that are brutal like that, because they were extremely brutal, and I mean it through the whole sense of the word. Like during that time, I would never mess with them, because I would live in fear, because not only would they know you, they would know your family, and they would get all the information that they can about them in order to basically either blackmail you or kind of extort you to the degree that you really can't do anything, because they would know everything that you would be doing. That's how dangerous they were. And on the other side, you would have to deal with Felipe Caldreon, who in my opinion was most likely extremely corrupt, and I will kind of talk about that. So I'll move back a little bit to the elections, so that way you can get a general idea, and as I kind of move forward, I'll explain my points to why I think he was extremely corrupt, or at the very least sketchy. So it would start in the elections where he would run against AMLO, who at that time I think was representing the Democratic Party of Mexico during that time. It wasn't Morena. Morena wasn't established until later on, but they would go up against each other, where it was reported that Calderon would win by a large margin, but it didn't turn out that way. By the end, it was an extremely slim margin. I believe it was like by 6%. I don't know exactly if it was that, but if it is, I'll put it somewhere on the screen exactly, by how much he won, but it was extremely slim. Aside from that, a lot of people suspected that, he was doing a lot of sketchy things to try to get the votes, because it was reported that in other states they said that they were doing a strange way of processing the votes. So most likely there was election fraud on Calderon's side. But obviously, they couldn't prove it because there was so much corruption during that time that obviously you couldn't get an answer from that. So there's that. There was the shady kind of election fraud that could have been possibly done, allegedly. But, there's that. And then we're going to move on to his war on drugs. So with the war on drugs, I believe he handled it extremely, extremely poorly. Obviously, because it cost the lives of 60,000 Mexican lives. With the way how he did his operations, with how he gathered intel and how he operated, he could have done it so much better and saved so many more lives, including Don Alejo's life. So in terms of that, he mismanaged it. He did not do a good job. Even our current president, AMLO, who a lot of people criticize him with, how he managed certain operations that were against the cartel, but I believe he did it way better than Calderon. So there's that point. Now, talking about Mexico's economy, they said that he did a good job, running the economy. They said that he increased the GDP, that he decreased the inflation rate. But if you kind of actually look into it, he increased the rate of poor people, not to mention that there was the same level for wages, but the inflation of other products, other goods. So it was not good for people who were more in a poor economic situation. It was even reported that some guy said that, the wages are staying the same, but, food and everything else are costing a lot more. And that, in my non-expert opinion, he increased the wealth of, obviously the rich, and didn't really help out the poor. And that he did benefit businesses, but not really the people. So in that aspect, I think he did not do that good of a job economy-wise, because even though it says one thing, if you look at it in more detail, he did not help the people that he was meant to help. So now that you have a basic idea of what was happening during this time, you need to see it through the eyes of a Mexican citizen, where it's like you live there and you can't really mess with the cartel, because if you mess with them, God knows what, they're capable of, especially the Zetas, who were considered terrorists. Because if you so much as look at them the wrong way, they'll either kill you, they'll kill your wife, kill your kids, kidnap them, do God knows what, trafficking, so many horrible things that they're capable of doing to you. It's like you can't even look at them the wrong way, because if they do, you're basically going to end up in a ditch somewhere to, be an example, to not mess with them. So there's that side. And then there's the side of like, you can't even go to the police to help you, because they're under the payroll of the cartel. So if you so much as tell them, then they get word of it, and then they go after you. So you live in fear of, all that stuff. And then you feel helpless, because you can't even trust the politicians, because they're corrupt also. And they're probably most likely, and I actually do suspect that Calderon was doing business with the cartel. So it's like, who do you go to? Because during this time, if you so much as spoke out, you were dead. Like, I definitely know that there's stories of like, cops trying to do the right thing and they end up, in a ditch, or they are made an example of. There's some people know Chalino Sanchez, where he spoke out, telling, songs of cartels and stuff like that. Like, it doesn't matter if you were someone, they would kill you. Even if you were a politician, if you were a reporter, they would just, end you right then and there. So there was nothing that, any politician would do, because, they were all working together. So looking at it through a Mexican citizen's perspective, it's like, who do you go to? Because there's no one. You can't say anything, because if you do, boom, you're gone. So that kind of gives you more respect to Don Alejo, who, even knowing the fact that he had no one who could help him, and the fact that the cartel were capable of doing so many things to him, to his family, he still looked at them and said, hey, send 1,000 of your men, because even if you send 1,000 of them, I'm gonna take 1,000 with me. It's like, I'll make an example of you to show that, the Mexican spirit will never die, to show you that no matter what you do to me, I'm gonna do so much worse to you. Because, you know, it's like, that's what I mean when he's like a symbol of what it means to be a hero. Because, you know, to be someone that's so capable of, you know, fighting such a powerful force and face it with no fear, it's like you have nothing but respect for this man. And I definitely have so much respect for him. Now that I said all that, and you have a general idea of what was happening, and, you know, I said all this, even though I'll probably say it later on in the video, hopefully you get a general idea of the whole situation around this, and you can kind of get a grasp of just how big of a thing he did, and can kind of give him respect. But, you know, without further ado, this is the end of the future segment. Now we'll go back to everything else, and I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of this video. Anyways, you know, take care. I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, peace out. But as the wife was quoting things that he would say, quote, "Everything on the ranch was mine. No one gave it to me. I earned it through hard work." With his wife even saying at one point to just sell the ranch, and he said, quote, "Do you want me to die? No, I can't. If I sell the ranch, then it's like losing a part of me. I'm nothing without my ranch." And when I say he was a man's man, like, I mean it to the fullest extent of what it means to be a man. And I don't even mean in the toxic masculinity type of way of what it means to be a man, like the toxic macho-ness. I mean it in the form of, like, let's just say like the Armstrong guy from Full Metal Alchemist, you know, in that kind of way, where you could look at a person and have a big sign of respect towards them because they have a lot of honor, integrity, they're hardworking, and that it's like someone that you can look up to, where he was very known for that. And that he even told his family at one point where he said, it takes a lot to be a man, and that he was a man because his words meant something. And that as long as nobody messed with anything that was his, then they wouldn't have to mess with him, aka por las buenas o por las malas.
Decía, nomás que a mí no me busque a alguien por la mala, porque también no me enfrento al que me haga a mí algo, que no me toquen a mí lo mío porque yo soy así. Y yo le decía, ¿cómo que no? Decía, no, yo primero me llevo 1, 2, 3 por delante que darles yo. A mí, ¿yo por qué les voy a dar? Si alguien viene y se me enfrenta a mí y fácilmente me quitan a mí mi cartera, mi camioneta o algo, yo no lo voy a hacer.
Which, I mean, how can you not respect that, honestly? So after the cartel left, he gathered up his workers, where he spoke to them in a serious but energetic tone, not really giving away what just happened a few minutes ago, where he told them to take the next day off and to enjoy the rest of the day. Now, this hasn't been brought up by other channels, as I was kind of checking to make sure I wasn't missing anything. But during the time that he was preparing his defenses and stuff like that, he would regularly check in with the family. So he would talk with the mother, the daughters, and I'll kind of let them talk about it in this interview with Grupo Reforma.
Yo hablo con él en la tarde, como siempre. Si él no estaba aquí, él estaba al pendiente de si ya salió su hija, si ya entró la otra hija, qué estamos haciendo. Él estaba enterado de todo. Entonces, en la mañana de ese sábado, él me habló como siempre que hablaba. ¿Cómo amaneciste? ¿Cómo amanecieron? ¿Qué novedades hay? Al ratito volvemos a hablar. Y hablamos en la tarde. Entonces me dice, te voy a decir una cosa. Y le digo, dime, mi amor, te quiero mucho. Y le digo, ¿sabes qué, mi amor? Yo también, mi amor. Pero lo sentí que el tono en que me lo dijo era algo extraño. Le digo, mi amor, yo también. Y ya me preguntó, cuando lleguen las niñas, faltaba una de llegar, dijo, que me hablen, porque traían radio los 3, que me avisen que ya están ahí. Y me dice, ¿sabes qué, mi amor? Mañana hablamos tempranito, o sea, el domingo en la mañana. Sí, le digo, claro que sí.
So once his workers left, he would go down to the cellar where he would take stock of his ammunition, his weapons, and start preparing up defenses, and that he would leave weapons near doors and windows during this time. So there's conflicting accounts as to him not getting sleep or him actually getting some sleep during this time. But in the same interview, I found that he was wearing blue pajamas. So I'm going to go with the fact that he did get some sleep and woke up sometime before 4 a.m. Shortly thereafter, you could hear the sounds of trucks coming from the distance, or when they arrived, they would flash their headlights and honk their horns. And there was one person speaking through the megaphone, basically saying that whoever was in there to come out or there would be consequences. They would then shoot into the air, waiting for someone to come out. But it was really quiet. That was until Don Alejo gave his response to them by firing at them, most likely killing one of them in the first shot. Shortly thereafter, the exchange would start, where he would shoot from one window and then he would quickly move from a different position and start firing again. And at this point, the Zetas would start to think that there was more than one person in the house firing at them. But let me just remind you, this was just one person, Don Alejo, who was at this point only 77 years old. So you can just imagine how crazy this motherfucker was. During the initial skirmish, Don Alejo was actually able to take down 4 of the members of the Zetas until they started to regroup, where they were starting to fire back and going cover to cover, with 2 of them managing to make their way into the house, where they were promptly greeted with Don Alejo with 2 hunting rifles in his hand, where they were promptly shot and left unconscious. Still alive, but obviously out of commission. Angry and frustrated, the Zeta members decided to start shooting at the house with grenade launchers instead of rifles. The house was peppered with explosions, one of them hitting Don Alejo, most likely sustaining heavy injuries. And once the smoke cleared, they could see the damage of the battle, with holes in the walls and in the windows. And once they made their way inside, they expected to find an army. But no, it was just one man, Don Alejo, who most likely succumbed to his injuries. And so, with the surviving Zeta members most likely not wanting to take any chances or expecting him to still be alive, shot him 2 times, one in the head and one in the chest. So it was clear that they were not going to take over the ranch, believing that the military was going to arrive soon, so they fled, leaving the 2 unconscious and the 4 dead. Not long after, the Marines would arrive, where they would reconstruct the events, and they would find a blood trail which would lead to Don Alejo in the bathroom with 2 rifles in his hand and a pistol by his side. It was reported that 900 bullet casings were shot at Don Alejo, none of them hitting him, and if they hadn't used grenade launchers, who knows what the results could have been. He was giving a hero's burial in Monterrey at the end of November 2010. After his death, many local media institutes delayed publishing the story, as Los Zetas during this time were still very powerful and had a lot of control and influence. That was until one newspaper published the story, which caused it to spread quickly throughout Mexican social media, where he soon became an icon for his display and actions, where it was described that he fought with bravery, honor, and courage. Sadly though, no investigation into his murder has taken place, but that doesn't diminish his story any less, because he showed us what it means to be a paragon of courage, bravery, and integrity, and what it means to be a man, because it takes a lot to be a man, and he was a man because his words and actions meant something.
Dentro de todo, él fue su última cacería y luchó hasta el final. Lo admiro y creo que eso fue su esencia, porque él siempre se defendió, porque es un dolor que únicamente los que lo vivimos sabemos, ¿verdad?
And so we reached the end of the video, and all I gotta say is this was a project that I really enjoyed. Don Alejo is nothing but an inspiration. I'm in awe, and it is very humbling and also kind of an honor to read a story about a man who, I don't know, showed so much bravery, and I don't know, it was a really fun story to talk about, and I hope his story never dies, because it is something that we should strive to be, someone like Don Alejo. But, you know, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be trying to work on more videos. In terms of lore, I don't know when I'm going to do another lore video. I'm thinking about it. I guess we'll find out sooner or later when, you know, I post it. But regardless, hopefully you guys have a good morning, good afternoon, and a good night. Until next time, nos vemos, vaqueros. See ya. A huevo.